Hello and welcome to your in-depth weekly horoscope for week commencing the 12th of December. This is for the Sun or the Ascendant. I'm going to give you some standout strands to look out for, which we can all relate to collectively, but please stay with me. I will then dive deep to give you in much greater detail each of the 12 zodiac signs. Now, as this week begins, a truly notable event. Mercury recently moved into the rather business-like sign of Capricorn, enters its shadow period. This is the period before the retrograde begins, which is on the 29th of December. It comes out of that on the 18th of January. But if we are dealing with anything that is more to do with those worldly affairs, it is going to be important to really manage the detail. But despite this, later this week, Mercury does forge a sparkling alliance with Uranus. And it's suggesting this combination that if we can think of new and fresh ways to approach our worldly interactions, even at this late stage of the year, perhaps the shadow period and then the retrograde is asking us to rethink or flex in new ways, which can actually be really valuable to us. Now, also, right at the start of the week, Venus and Jupiter, the two planets of fortune, are just in a square. This runs over from the previous week. It could give us an opportunity to be very generous to someone. Maybe we can get together with people that we have a kinship with, particularly actually through those worldly interactions with Venus in the 10th house. But this is a week when the Sun does square up with Neptune. If you remember, this began on the last day of last week. The Sun in the sign of Sagittarius is very much about discovery, adventure, independence, travel, higher knowledge, philosophies, and even education can be around the rule of law. Neptune, of course, is very much to do with dreams. It's a very mystical influence, and at its best can have quite a magical impact. But I think this particular influence can see us amplify or exaggerate our senses, even if they're not conscious. So if something just puts us in a bit of a spin, there could be a tendency to buy into it a little bit too much. Ironically, Jupiter, the other ruling planet of Pisces, along with Neptune, is in a sensational link with Pluto for the whole of this week. If there is something that you've been working on in a physical way for a long time that has required a great deal of patience, it could be your links with someone that have been developing, perhaps not so much at a tangible level, more an instinctive level. There could be someone that your association with can actually end up being very fortunate indeed. And from Monday through to Thursday, the Sun's in a very constructive link with Saturn. This can offset some of the distortion the Sun's right angle with Neptune can create. And remember, with that Mercury shadow period, managing details is important. So what Saturn is doing with the Sun here is asking us to be a bit more detached, because it's in the sign of Aquarius, which is airy, to think through our ideas for expansion, but research them in a very thorough and step-by-step way. And that can push back some of the dissipating energy of Neptune square to the Sun, which can drain a little bit of vitality from proceedings. Now, on Saturday, there is a quarter moon in the precise sign of Virgo. This is just saying to us, if we do feel that we want to help out or volunteer or assist people in some kind of ways, that's very laudable. We just need to make sure in the following week that we're not promising to do something that actually becomes a bit of a bind to deliver on, perhaps around those festive arrangements. But right at the end of this week, it's the Sun that comes into Jupiter, into a square with Jupiter, replacing Venus. And this is an aspect really that can actually have a very generous side to it. If we can find ways to embrace the more traditional festive strands of looking out for those who are less fortunate, of just small but important gifts, these type of things actually could really have quite an impact on the recipient. But it's also saying to us not to get too caught up in trying to be too much of a people pleaser, I think, around our budget if we are facing some financial realities which are tricky. I think we need to stick with what we feel really comfortable with. But there could be some kind of discussion at the end of this week where you find yourself talking about something where you have a very different worldview from the person that you're discussing this issue with, but actually you can gain or learn something from what could even be a disagreement if you're open to the possibility. Now, we're nearly in 2023. What will the year hold for you as an individual? You can gain a lot from the zodiac forecasting for sure, but it's your personal astrology which is really crucial. If you give me your time, date and place of birth, I can give you your forecast for the coming year. And this will give you searing insights as to when planetary influences are impacting on your natal chart. But also my special package of 30% off. You can get your life roadmap, character analysis report. Please see the link below. If you're new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. I'd love you to subscribe. If you're an ongoing follower, thank you so much for joining me once more. Now, here is your in-depth forecast for each sign. So Sagittarius, your week commencing the 12th of December forecast sees the sun in your sign compromised by the draining, rather enervating vibe of Neptune in your sector of home and emotions. If there is something around your immediate environment which you are finding challenging, whether it's street noise, whether it's cold, whether it's heat, whether it's noisy neighbours, whether it's the needs of family members, those can really be quite tricky to deal with this week. However, it is true to say that your ruler Jupiter in your fourth house actually forges a brilliant link with Pluto in house 2 to do with your finances. So as equally as Neptune could be a mischief maker, Jupiter in the same sector can bring reward. So maybe an issue to do with a property matter can start to get clearer for you. But I think generally your energy around where you live or your emotional dimension could be one that just depletes you somewhat. Ironically, if you can just keep focusing on practical matters, particularly around communication, the superb link between your Sun and Saturn could see you shaping up a document, a presentation, a website, a blog in a very productive way. But any kind of emotional distraction could be more challenging for you. Now, Mercury enters its pre-retrograde shadow period, and I think it's true to say that as you come to the end of this year, Mercury's asking you to think about how you think about your values, but also your everyday money. What's new? We're all having to do that at the moment. However, the quarter moon, which occurs on Saturday this week, is a little bit more challenging in some ways because the moon's going to be very close to the surface. So if there is something you feel quite frustrated about, it's going to be hard to conceal it. Perhaps something you feel passionate that you want to focus on, maybe someone wants you to fit into their construct when you're wanting to be much more individually yourself. Yet with Venus in your second house, this can be a time, despite the challenges that we're all facing in terms of increased costs and interest rates and so forth, you could still find some ways forward despite Mercury's entering that pre-retrograde shadow. And in fact, Mercury forges a really creative sparking influence with Mercury later this week, which could see you spot an opportunity and you can pursue that successfully. It's just by the end of this week, the Sun and your ruler Jupiter do come into a square. This is an interesting one. It really is a lovely part of your nature that you're so optimistic, positive, upbeat, and, really keen to see the side of situations that is more expansive and broad, and I think that's absolutely marvellous. But if someone does ask you, perhaps it is around a personal issue, a family matter, to take on a bit more responsibility, just at the point when you want to concentrate more on what's important to you, just be aware that you could end up being a bit resentful if you let the side of you that wants to please people be a bit stronger than the side of you that needs to please yourself.